We were going from the Industrial Revolution to where huge fortunes were being made, and there was the establishment of the financial and economic system that we still know today. A lot of the foundation was being laid just prior to the year 1900, and especially, as some of you may know, 1913, the Federal Reserve itself started its official functions 100 years ago. So going back to about 120 years ago, Baum was working on this book, and he intended it to be an allegory of the times, or satire, or you can call it a fairy tale, or a fable, because it includes some animals, actually quite a few in the story. Talking animals are what's characterizing fables. So in this genius of literary work, I mean, you could almost call it an opus, you know, it has symbolic meaning. So it's talking about the politics of the day through the opinion or the political affiliation of the writer. Now, Baum was a supporter of William Jennings Bryan. So you could look this name up, because he was someone that was shooting for the presidency, but obviously didn't get it because we never had a President Bryan. But his views were populists, as they were called, or a popular movement. So they were not Democratic, and they were not Republican Party. What they believed in was going back to basics, the power of the people, and they were talking about silver, silver, silver. So this is a thing that could have been covered up. It actually could be purposely not in the movie version. I'm going to explain. Okay? The story in the book pretty much goes like it's depicted in the movie. And it starts in Kansas, and Dorothy represents the people of the Midwest. Basically, your down-to-earth, garden variety, salt-of-the-earth people that this candidate Bryan was calling on, and where indeed he had a lot of supporters. So Dorothy, amongst all of her people, was facing some kind of dilemma, something in the world. And this disaster hits, and Dorothy gets transported, and she lands in Oz. So what is this land, and why is it called that? Well, here. You know OZ is the abbreviation for an ounce, and that's how they measure gold. So when you get there, she's in this place where the yellow brick road starts, and the bricks, or the bullion, are yellow because basically they're gold. And you've got to walk on this. And before she goes on this walk, see, this whole huge thing happens. There's a catastrophe, because by her getting there to the start of her adventure, she kills the Wicked Witch of the East. The East, see, that's representative of the establishment power of the East Coast of the United States, all the older cities and all the rich oligarch families and such. So they get killed when Dorothy arrives in the quest of the Oz. And the only thing you see poking out from under the house that killed her is the witch's feet. And she has on these shoes. Now here's the thing, here's the clincher. You probably think of it as the ruby slippers. Tell me if that's wrong. Okay? Because you know about the movie, you've heard about it, you've seen the images, the posters, all the pics. The ruby slippers are so famous, they're probably more famous than the movie, especially the women with a shoe fetish. But the ruby slippers were not in the original book, you see. This was an addition that MGM did They said it was for Technicolor reasons. It would be more flashy, you know, more glamour and glitz. But actually, they may have had other reasons to take out the original device. See, what Baum put in the story was silver shoes. I think they would be just as nice, but they weren't in the movie. However, in the original intention of the book, which is symbolizing the economic structure, silver shoes were gained by Dorothy as soon as she got to Oz, and she puts them on, and they have some incredible power. She doesn't even know the full power that they have. She goes walking on the gold with the silver. That's basically, I could stop the video now. Actually, no, I need to explain more. You know it's getting pretty deep because she walks along and she gathers up her tribe, her people on this quest. You know, you've got to have help. Look at the video games. You can't win these things on your own. So she joins up with these other figures, and I guess the first one is the Tin Man. The Tin Man represents the worker in the industrial factories, and his heart has been taken out. He doesn't even have one. So he needs his heart back. So the populist movement is going to give that back to him. He's the laborer. He's all rusted out and just tired from this work. And then the next one is the Scarecrow. That's the farmer. You see, the populist movement is going to give the Scarecrow a brain so that the farming people, you know, are going to be able to think. It's kind of insulting, but basically means that they've never been able to get education. They're just toiling away in the soil all the time, trying to produce the food for the nation. And then the next one, the third one, is the lion. And the lion actually represents Bryan. It's true. William Jennings Bryan is the lion, but he doesn't quite have enough courage. He wants to. He comes out swinging, but when it comes to the fight, he just doesn't have enough. Of course, there's always Toto, which I mentioned was the Cairn Terrier, and Toto got the name from a slang term back in those days called teetotaler. And a teetotaler was basically someone who was also affiliated with the populist movement. So the little dog that's always supposed to be with Dorothy, you know, her pet is Toto, a teetotaler. Now, they're going on their journey, and we forgot to mention the Wicked Witch of the East has a sister, and it's the Wicked Witch of the West. And she's real bad because the West is represented by all the problems that are heading across the nation as it expands westward, you know, the Manifest Destiny. And she's evil because she wants to get the silver. She really thinks that the silver of the East should be passed to her, but Dorothy's got them now. Now, of course, you've got the Good Witch of the North and the Good Witch of the South. So those are forces that the populist movement hoped to bring in, and especially when you think about the South during those times, they wanted to tap into that support and that voting base. Now, as they go along, they're headed for the Emerald City because that's where all their answers are going to be given to them, and Dorothy's going to get to go home. Well, the Emerald City actually represents Washington, D.C., and one of the keys to that is because the color is emerald, which is similar to the color of the greenback at that time, which was the model for the Federal Reserve note. You know that cash, the money back in those days, was a greenback, and there was no Federal Reserve, there was just a central U.S. bank. But soon thereafter, at the turn of the century, Federal Reserve took over and started to issue all the money. It's basically a loan. So I'm not going to get into that whole controversy there. It is a conspiracy, by the way, though. It's a true conspiracy. and one that has so much power that it's able to operate in its criminal conspiracy. So anyhow, they get to the Emerald City, and who's there but the Wonderful Wizard? Now, the Wonderful Wizard represents the president, the POTUS. And during that time, I believe it was Cleveland. I think it was President Cleveland. Let me check. Sorry. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes you like to do that. Who was the president around the turn of the century? In any case, that's who is slightly represented. But it's really all presidents that reside in the Emerald City, Washington, D.C. And what gets revealed is the fact that the wizard's just a puppet. He doesn't really have any power. You know, it's just exaggerated. When you get there, you realize, like, hey, you know, this is the reality of it. He's just like an ordinary person, and he turns the tables back on you, and he says, well, you know, you've got to solve your own problems. Which is actually kind of a nice thing if you really think that that's the reality of the president. And I think that's their kind of cop-out, in a way, because they really are doing something. They're more than a puppet. Certainly all the people that are in on it are not just puppets. I mean, maybe puppets of the devil, but anyhow, the explanation at the end of the silver shoes is that by clicking them together, it'll take you wherever you want to go. So I told you that the story had an original intention to teach something about the economic system. And what we're encountering in today's age is not that much different from about 120 years ago. And many people think that silver is magical. But I'm here to tell you, if it didn't work then, how is it going to work now? It's only one small part of the problem. I mean, I'm not knocking silver. I just did some videos about Adam Kokesh, I did some videos about Chris Duane, I did some videos about Bitcoin, and actually my most radical videos are about my own economic system that I want to implement. But silver, and gold for that matter, are never going to be a standard in a huge global system because there's not enough of it, and plus it can't be controlled. You cannot use something as a standard if you're going to trade it and sell it, and it's going to be at the whim of inflation. And that's completely contradictory. So therefore, people don't understand what they're talking about when they say, let's go to a gold standard. But people are a little bit more shrewd when they talk about silver counterbalancing gold as checks and balances. Certainly that's one part of the solution, but it's only transitionary. It's not the end game. That's why I'm not putting everything into silver. I'm not going to tell you to put everything in silver or depend on silver, and certainly not gold. Silver has a power. It does. Mostly because we give it that power. It's fiat. Just like gold is fiat. I'm more interested in those things in a barter relationship, small pieces, especially with gold. They should be really tiny pieces for transactions. I think that we will eventually get to a standard like that as far as coinage, just to use for certain capitalistic small-scale ventures. But that's the story, folks, about the silver shoes that you probably never heard about. And if you're interested, get the book. It's all facts that I've given you. And if I happen to have made any mistakes and you're knowledgeable, then please make a comment. But otherwise, feel free to say whatever you want. This is freedom of speech here. I don't censor, usually, unless someone's totally out of line. But I give about 99% leeway to whatever you want to say. Share this with all your friends, favorite, thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe.